I really appreciate I was worried about that. So yeah, I appreciate everyone coming out today. This is going to be really fun. We're going to have a really robust conversation about AI. We're going to try to focus it specifically on how this is going to help you guys as small business owners. So before I introduce the panel, I just want to start and talk a little bit about some of the frameworks, for folks in the room that are not deep in the AI space. So when I think about AI in general, especially as it applies to small businesses, and we work with a lot of companies that are wondering how it applies to them, I think about some of the changes that's happened in the last 2 years, and a lot of the buzz and the hype that we've been hearing about AI because of some of those changes. And I think when you think about what's happened with Gen AI, really think about what knowledge workers and the kind of the work that knowledge workers do, how can that be transferred over to a computer to be able to handle some of those tasks? And so I also think a lot about the way that humans interact with machines in this process. And there's a term that I like to use called humans in the loop. That when you think about humans at the beginning, setting intention for how these AIs are going to work, and then also at the end to be able to check everything that goes out the door. The current landscape for AI and the ecosystem is really robust right now. So I think that's one of the reasons why this conversation is going to be so exciting. Because of Gen AI, because of ChatGPT, the last 2 years has created an ecosystem where every single day we have new tools coming in. So you have the opportunity to take advantage at much lower cost than you did before of AI, off-the-shelf tools, and then also custom tools. So an example of that in your business, and we'll dig into it more today, could be customer service, chatbots that help with the customer service process, market analysis, operational efficiencies inside your businesses, and then personalization. And when you think about AI previously, one of the ways that AI has showed up for all of us, an easy way to think about it is the personalization that we see when inside Amazon, for example. And that's something that's playing out as well. There's 2 thoughts that I want to leave you with before we get started here. And one of them is thinking about the way that content is changing given what's happened with Gen AI. So when I think about the new content creator, I think about a knowledge manager inside the business. When you manage knowledge inside a business, because of the power of AI, in a lot of ways the content is free. And so I want all of us today to think a lot about the ways that we can manage our internal proprietary data and our proprietary knowledge. And the second and last point is that not everything in AI is chat. And this last year, because of ChatGPT, most of us have focused on them. But these large language models have a ton of power to be able to deal with unstructured data in ways that we've never been able to before. And that can show up in dashboards, and that can show up in analytics that have nothing to do with having a conversation with your computer. So with that in mind, I want to introduce the panel today. Really a great panel. The first person that I'd like to introduce, and then I'm going to have you guys talk about your background, is Claire Griffin. Claire is from Amazon Web Services. She's the head of worldwide SMB strategy. And so Claire, will you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. I think this is on. Is it working? Okay. Very excited to be here. I've been at Amazon for about 2.5 years. Before that, I was at Microsoft for nearly 15 years, most of which I spent overseas, running various field organizations in Turkey and Singapore and in South Africa, across all of Africa. So very exciting times then, and even more so now. I love what we're doing with small, medium businesses across Amazon globally. So yeah, that's it. I've been in Seattle since '97 with the breaks across seas. So I've been here for a while, used to weather like this.
Thank you. And the second panelist is Rasmussen. And Ray is the founder and managing principal of rGen Consulting. Ray, will you talk to the group a little bit about your background?
Sure. Does this thing work?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it, but it does, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, is this working?
It doesn't sound like it.
Jeff is from our PR firm. And,
Oh, you're good.
it says it's on. All right, Jeff's from our PR firm. I've asked him to stand and clap wildly regardless of what I say. Yeah. Thank you. So rGen Consulting is on the business side of artificial intelligence. And so what we're going to talk a little bit here today is about how artificial intelligence can make a difference in your business. And that's the business we are in. And an example of that is yesterday I met with some nice folks in Nashville who do medical records. And they would echo a lot of what you said, folks. That really it comes down to having good information from which to work. So you use that to answer simple questions that are coming in on AI. But then they use automation in what they call RPA, which I think it's robotic process automation, but it just means automation. And they use RPA to automate some things. And they're making huge strides. As a small business, they've gone from $300,000 a year to about $3 million a year. And in the next 4 months, they expect to be at $10 million. And to satisfy that level of growth, they've had to really look at what they can do with artificial intelligence, RPA, and automation generally. But it stands both on the knowledge management. Having good information from which to work is really the starting point of their success.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited to have you guys discuss some of the use cases today, because when I am out there talking with people, I think that's one of the big questions is around use cases and how this really applies to them, both on the growth side within sales, but also operationally. So Claire, can you start us out and just talk a little bit about from your experience how use cases kind of play out and give some examples as well?
Yeah, great. So I actually just heard Gardner give a presentation about a taxonomy of use cases that I think would be a useful way to kick us off. And that's to think about everyday AI and transformational AI. And then within both of those categories, you have internal and external uses. So pretty much any use case you can think about for AI falls into one of those 4 buckets. So for example, if you think about everyday AI, that's like having an AI productivity expert at your door, like somebody who's going to help you constantly reduce your costs, improve productivity across pretty much any part of your business. And with AI, like a lot of times we see it fail because people start with the tool and they don't start with the business. Like what are you trying to solve? And I mean, that's like everybody gives that advice, right? It's not about AI. That's just generally good advice when you're dealing with technology. And some of the use cases that we see on the internal side, actually, this is a pretty interesting one. There's this company called Maestro Pizza, and they're publicly referenceable, so I can talk about them. They're in Saudi Arabia, and they were a small family-owned pizza business, started in like 2010, something like that. And they wanted to compete with Domino's and other, large global corporate type of pizza places. And one of the ways they wanted to do it was to differentiate based on the service they gave. And they did this with their own internal IT by recording, like they would have their IT guys sit and record 10 hours a day of video of how to make pizzas. And then they would try to match that manually. So it just took tons and tons of time. And we came and talked to them about SageMaker, which is a machine learning hub, essentially, which helps you automate your machine learning, which, by the way, AI isn't just about chats, like you said. Like Amazon's been doing AI since the 90s. If you've ever shopped on Amazon in 1999 or something, I think when I started, that was AI giving you recommendations. But back to the story about Maestro, which I think is interesting. They cut their IT costs 25% by automating that process. So basically, they took all that video. That was the basis of the data. And then they automated a standard of like what's the kind of pizza that just has tomato sauce and cheese on it? Margarita, that's what I was trying to think of. So they wanted to give the best margarita pizza out there. Thank you. And they had a standard of what it looked like, and they could just do machine learning matching, essentially, which I thought was super interesting and a really fun example of a use case. So that's actually both internal and external when you think about it. We also have lots of customers who are automating pieces of their customer service. Many of you have probably encountered this personally on various different publicly facing websites where you're trying to find answers to some somewhat different degree of success, right? That doesn't just apply to large enterprises. Small businesses are wanting to differentiate themselves that way too. And that's a kind of fun thing, is that you don't have to just use something off the shelf. You can make it more personalized to what you're doing in your business and your data, rather than exposing your data to possibly being used to then train other models, right? You really don't want to do that. I'm kind of getting off a little bit, but I think it's a super important point.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Ray, is there some things that you might mention around use cases that you're seeing when you're out there and talking to businesses that could apply?
Yes, I really like the part about thinking about it as a first kind of a personal productivity thing. That's a good place to get started. But I might look at, different industries. I work with a lot of law firms. One of them is here, Ogden, Murphy Wallace. I think we can almost throw a rock from here to their offices. And I was talking to one of their partners about it, and David Schoolcraft is the partner who has responsibility for the healthcare practice. They're kind of well known in this space, and they do a lot of work. And they've been looking at different ways to use AI, and there are folks like Case Text, which was bought by Thomson Reuters. And what they do is they'll review a contract, a 275-page technology contract that might come from Amazon, or more likely from Microsoft. It's brutal to get through those contracts. It'll take 3 attorneys a week to get through it, and then they can redline it. Things like Case Text can take a look at that contract and can review it and redline it in about 5 minutes. And so the difference there is unbelievable. So that little piece of information is attractive. Here's what David said that I thought was really insightful. He said, for him, artificial intelligence is like Ozempic. Anybody know what Ozempic is? It's gonna make you thinner. But if you want to be strong, you're still going to have to do push-ups. And that's what he said. So you have to spend time on what you would call knowledge management, the discipline of knowledge management, the discipline of process redesign, and the discipline of thinking about your business model and how it needs to change in order to take full advantage. So like Ozempic, these things can make you more streamlined. But if you want to be strong, you're going to have to do the push-ups.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I would say too that the concept of garbage in, garbage out is now really elevated when it comes to large language models, because if you don't manage your internal data properly, there can be a lot of hallucinations that happen within these systems. And so garbage in, garbage out is really key right now. An example of this is something that's a use case around sales, in the sales pipeline that we developed for a small company, where you have a conversational chatbot living on your website, but the context and the persona of this chatbot is very specific to a salesperson. So not only does it answer your questions like ChatGPT might, but also asks questions, really smart questions that qualify a prospect. And so by the time the conversation is done, that prospect is qualified. It can pass them on to a salesperson, a human salesperson, if it's qualified, and if not, it can keep answering questions. So as you think about chat, think about the ways that it can extend into your sales pipeline. Let's discuss some of the risks and concerns associated with data. That's another question that comes up all the time when people are thinking about putting their content in the cloud. And so maybe Ray, if you want to start, you're working with a lot of lawyers. I know that's a huge concern, and but can you kind of frame it generally for the group so that they know, like, what should they be concerned about?
I think you have choices. I mean, most of the things that you use will give you an option to make sure that none of your stuff goes out into the wild. So ChatGPT will do that. The Microsoft Copilot stuff will do that. And I think almost all of the other ones will give you an option. So one thing to do is just simply check the checkbox that says, please don't share my data beyond the boundaries of this session. So that's one thing you can do that's fairly simple. I think for things that are more complicated, there are new companies that are coming into, there's one that started a couple of years ago in Belgium called Justify, and that's Justif AI. And what they do is they insert code to make sure that you stay compliant. So if you were a healthcare business and you wanted to stay HIPAA compliant, you can make sure that you insert this stuff into your code so that it doesn't get outside. But as a practical matter, as a small business, here's the thing I'd actually do right now. I would write down some simple policies, some guidelines for when people should use AI, when they should not use AI, what they should do with respect to their customers and so forth, so that with one piece of paper and, you know, or an email out to your team, you can get about 70% of the protection you probably need in the long run by simply getting some reasonable rules of the road in place.
Yeah, that's great. And Claire, when you think about small business in particular, I know AWS, you know, when you think about security around that system, it's thought of, you know, it's an important topic, but how do you think about it for small businesses, and can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I actually wanted to build on what you were saying, because I think the point about just having written policies first before you start getting into the technology is important for security in general. You know, we do some security assessments for small businesses. It's something that you can just look at, you know, like who has access to what data and what situations. And I think that, like, starting with that and starting with like the basics of guardrails around it is something to consider. Beyond that, I think what applies to small business for AI security does go back to data primarily, and thinking about, is your data secured? So once you get the policies, you know, making sure it's stored in a secure place that is not gonna, you're not gonna get access in terms of hacking and things like that. So again, it's the same, but you want to think, just trying to think too about how, like, I agree with what you said in terms of like ChatGPT, you can check a box, right? But it's not the same as building it secure from the ground up and kind of setting that foundation. It's a whole different thing when you can access the data that you need. Like, you might not have enough data yourself, but combining it with third-party data in a secure way is something that you can use as a small business. So I think that's the other point I like to make, which is something you could do within AWS.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you know, when you think about building custom AI, you have the same options that you have when you're building custom applications. You know, you've got the three big providers: AWS, Azure, GCP, Google. And then you're using, based on the, you know, who you're using, you get a choice of foundational models that you can use within those systems. And so I guess the follow-up question is, if you're building applications in AWS and you're feeling secure about that, would you agree that, you know, building AI applications in those same cloud services, you should feel that same level of security?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it starts with the security of our infrastructure to begin with, but then beyond that, like you just said, it's about choice. And we're really about working backwards from our customers and democratizing access to technology. That's how we started as a company. And with that, we have like a 3-layer approach to AI. I'd say the first layer probably doesn't apply to small businesses, and that's those companies that want to build their own large language models. And like we have Trainium, we have chips that will train, you know, like you don't need to worry about that. But then the next layer up is, you can think of it as like a marketplace to many different kinds of models. Even Google's model, one of them, sits in our marketplace. And we have Anthropic, we have our own models. So we're really trying to give you a lot of choice, because your industry is unique and your business cases are unique. So not every model, it's not one size fits all. You need to have some consideration for which model, because every model is trained on different data sets and will work differently. I'm not that technical, at least not anymore. I used to be, but I was playing around. You know, I built a AWS account, and then I was trying to summarize my meetings. So I had several like long 8-hour kind of offsite workshops. And so I wanted to test which model would be best for that. And it was really interesting to see, you know, going into Claude 2, I really liked the best. I thought it was just amazing. And I tried like 5 other ones, and it was easy for me to do that. Like, I could go in and test models against my use case of coming up with action items out of an 8-hour meeting recording very quickly.
Yeah. So I think we're going to move to talking about tools that are off the shelf that can be applied today. But before we do that, Ray, do you have any other thoughts about security and risk before we move on to that?
Maybe. I think security is kind of an interesting thing. You know, the guys that work in security are a little bit like attorneys. My joke about them is that attorneys are supposed to stop bad things from happening, and in the process just stop all things from happening. And that's what the problem is with security. You can create an environment within which you're absolutely secure, but you don't get much done. And so I think you have to use a little bit of common sense. And, you know, if small business brings anything to the table, it's a little bit of common sense. So I think with respect to security, I'd hook my wagon to either AWS, which has strong security models. I'm not sure about Google, to be honest with you, but I bet they do. That one you'd have to check. But Microsoft also has security models that I would adopt and just use, so that you're not spending your time on that as much as you're spending your time on the other things that drive your business. So I hook my wagon to somebody who has 1,000 engineers worried.
Well, I like the idea of these guidelines and establishing guidelines. I think that everybody in the room should kind of do that as a starting point and think about that. We're actually building a chat interface for a large college that allows the internal employees to be able to ask questions to it related to guidelines. And I think it's just going to come up for a lot of your people inside your businesses. So we're going to move on to the last piece before we get to Q&A, and that is like, how do we start today? Like, what are some actionable things that we can do today and off-the-shelf products that we can get started with that can have a big impact on the folks in this room? So, Ray, do you want to start?
Yeah. This is going to be a little bit Microsoft centric, and then I'm gonna ask my friend to help me balance that in a way, because I know that's tool set better than I know the AWS tool set. So I think they have a fine one. I just don't know it as well. For $30 a month, you can get Microsoft Copilot. You can, for $30. And what it will do is lots of things. There's one that runs in Outlook where you say, I need to tell everybody what the holiday schedule is going to be. This year we're gonna give both July 4th and Christmas off. So, please write a friendly email that takes care of this, and the thing will write it for you. So that's an example of something that you can do today. Then the thing that you're probably familiar with, you can sign up for ChatGPT for $22 a month. And that can get you started right away on some stuff like that. You can use, there are other free things that you can use. The Microsoft Copilot is an example of a free tool that you can use. And there are other tools, and I apologize for not knowing the AWS suite as well, but there's the Microsoft Copilot Studio, which is, I think, free to start, and it allows you to build your own chatbots and other things like that. And all of those things are kind of, get started. But if I was running a business here in this room, I would think about this as just one of the arrows in your quiver. The AI sits as part of a continuum of things to think about. Like, how do I make this better for my customers? What's the process that I use? How do I automate this stuff? How do I get errors out of the system? And so don't think of this as the silver bullet that you can start with, but think of it as a continuum of things that you can do to improve the quality, the efficiency, and the impact of everything that you're doing on your team. Remember those nice folks in Nashville? That was this nice woman there who's been running this thing. She was a paralegal, and she decided there's just smarter ways to do this whole thing. And so she's been working on medical records, and she's built a business based on that basic premise, which is look at this across the continuum. How do I improve process? How do I improve the training of my people? How do I improve automation? And AI is an element of that, but see it as kind of a continuum, if you will.
Yeah, I like that. Claire?
So we do have some native tools like Party Rock, which is a really fun one to check out, that has a lot of AI templates built into it that do many different tasks depending on what it is you're trying to achieve. But I want to go back to that working backwards from what it is you're trying to achieve. And if it's just a standard kind of productivity improvement, then there are so many apps out there that could be more specific to your industry than something generic. So you want to find that use case. And there's more apps built on AWS than any other cloud service out there. Like, that's really something that we've been able to offer across our history, is really specific applications and things that you probably use, like Freshworks or HubSpot or Dropbox, or I could go on and on. There's tens and tens of hundreds of thousands of them. And so I think if you can absolutely do that. You can build your own app, and now we have the tools to make that really easier. In fact, we just released something called Amazon Q, which makes it very easy to build your own apps using Bedrock and using data that's been trained for more specific use cases. But you can also take advantage of these other SaaS apps out there, software as a service, that gives you the specific thing that you want to use. And what I've seen is that most small businesses have probably 6 apps they're already using. And what they don't realize is that they can be better together. You know, you can think more about having a common infrastructure, so common identity, like instead of having to sign into each one individually, you know, sign into just one time and then you're good. And then it's back to the data. Like you want to be able to use that data across the different apps. And that's something that our partners can help you with, is how to implement that. And that's what's going to get you to that automation around a specific business problem. And I think if you're also like beyond the everyday AI, if you're really talking about that transformational AI, you do have to go beyond using these just generational content tools. You really need to think about AI more strategically, more broadly. And to do that, training is important. You know, get started with just some basic understandings. It's not that complicated really, and it's amazing how easy you can get started. So my team, we've started something globally called the Connected Community, which has all kinds of free trainings. We even offer it from a business point of view. So I've done like an introduction to cloud technology for business owners. It's on YouTube. We've done one how to innovate like Amazon and work backwards from your customers and think about how to connect technology into that.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to leave you before we go to the Q&A with just a couple of frameworks for how to think about this. When you look at your businesses and you see, and we do this a lot when we do opportunity assessments for people, where are the places in your businesses where there's a ton of manual stuff getting done and there's a lot of unstructured data? So I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a sales team and there's friction around them going to a meeting and then inputting data into a Salesforce or a HubSpot or something like that, where that can then be used and automated. So you have a lot of manual things happening, form entry. You've got unstructured data, people talking in a meeting, and you need to get that into a database. That's a really good example. There's tons of places in your businesses where that's happening. Those are opportunities for AI to do magical things. And so that's one. The other thing is, and you know, one of the tools that was mentioned before was ChatGPT. Well, ChatGPT for the $20 a month, you get something that I think is going to show up in Google, it's going to show up in Amazon, it's going to be the next big thing, which is these marketplaces. OpenAI has GPTs. And what GPTs are is a way for you to identify some of these manual processes that you're doing and build in a very easy way, no code, using natural language, your own GPT just for yourself, just for that particular process. And it's really easy to do. There's some more complex ways of making them more robust. But just out of the gate, if you wanted to build a blog post creator for yourself, or if you wanted to build some other kind of writer for yourself, using your own natural language, you can start to build your own tools. And so it's really powerful. It's going to show up in Google. It's going to show up.
We have that already. Yeah, that's what Party Rock does.
That's what Party Rock does. Yeah, so I think these kinds of marketplaces where you can kind of spin up your own AI are going to start showing up all over the place. So one thing before we go to Q&A that I want you guys to talk about is some of these resources. You spoke to this before. Amazon has great free learning. There are some others too. So can we share with the group some of the places that are free online courses, things that they can take where they can learn and get smarter, you know, about some of these things like deeplearning.ai, you know, stuff like that.
No, you go ahead.
All right, so I want to suggest some things that will cost you less than 6 minutes. I would go to the announcements. The Google announcement in March of last year was fairly good. It's like 6 minutes, it's all a bunch of things that they plan to do someday, but it still gives you an idea what the possibilities are. Similarly, I would watch for the Amazon announcements and the Microsoft announcements. They take about 6 minutes to watch, and they will give you in 6 minutes or thereabouts the whole waterfront of what is coming, so that you don't have to take too deep a dive. Then I had my own team looking for this. They have been looking for the AI stuff that you can really use. Surprisingly, some of what they've come up is just a YouTube video. And an example of that is the best training we have found on how to write a good prompt is on YouTube. Again, it's about 9 minutes. So that's what I'd be looking for, is something that is digestible. And there's all of these big players. Amazon has always had great training, and so they've got a lot of that out there. But you're going to find that at Google, and you're going to find it at Microsoft. They have a ton of free training. The problem is that you, as a small business owner, may not have, you know, an hour and a half to devote to this, or take the 13 modules that, you know, make up their AI basics. So what I recommend doing is looking for YouTube stuff. Take the thing that you really wanna do, like I wanna write a good prompt. And look and find the guy who's done it in 6 minutes, or it's the one who's done it in 6 minutes, and go watch that, because you can get an awful lot out of that. And I would call that kind of cheese holing the problem, right? Not try to understand everything all at once. Don't take 13 hours of training, because that'll, you won't remember any of it anyway. But when you have a problem, I would actually go to YouTube.
So there, and I want to jump to you, Claire, because deeplearning.ai is a great resource. Google has some really amazing free resources, and so does LinkedIn. But recently, Claire, I did the AI for executives that Amazon has provided. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because it was like an hour and a half training. It was amazing. And I know you guys have deeper technical trainings too, but
Yeah.
for this group, what's the right thing?
I'm really excited that I think historically we focus more on technical training, and we're now, especially through our global S&B strategy, we are thinking more about like starting with the business needs, because when you're talking about AI, back to it's not just a technology. You don't want to just try a tool. You want to integrate it into your business plan. And what we're seeing is that regardless of business size, it's the first time technology is a decision that the business is making, not the IT department. And so you need to become educated as a business owner. And we have many, like it's called Skill Builder. So you can just search on Amazon Skill Builder. There's many different trainings within that. I took the IT AI for executives recently myself, and I found it really comprehensive, good introduction. I really liked it. There's another one, if you want to start to get a little bit more hands-on beyond just like the business strategy. I love our Cloud Builder, it's called Cloud Quest. It's because it's gamified, and anything that's gamified, I'm into. The Pokemon Go, for example. But yeah, so it gives you little tasks to do, and you take on a persona, and you learn over time, and it really gets you this very rapidly to build up some technical knowledge. So that's fun. But look at the S&B resources that are specifically out there now. We've been spending the last 2 years since I've been in this role building out cloud technology, including AI resources for small businesses. So you can search on like Amazon Smart Business Hub, Amazon Connected Community. There's a lot of really great stuff, and it's all much shorter, bite size. You can still do the 13 modules if you want to as well, but get started with something a little simpler.
And I think what we'll do is talk to the chamber about sharing some of these links out with you after. So Talia, I'm on schedule, you noticed. And so I wanted to kind of give you guys the rest of this agenda. So we're going to open it up to some Q&A so that we can get some of your questions answered. And then we're going to do some workshops. So each of us, and then Larry Arnstein from Simply Augmented is over at this other table here. We're going to be at the tables kind of talking about some of these issues and answering more questions. But also, we want to know about your businesses, so we'll workshop a little bit at the end. But let's open it up for audience questions. Anybody have any questions?
So it seems to me that there are going to be more and more choices, right, of how businesses choose which ecosystem to go into. Is it Google? Is it AWS? Is it Microsoft? How would you suggest a business creates a framework to make those decisions?
Great question.
It's okay if I answer that? Of course. I'm in that business. And so, so I answer that question all the time. And I think the trick is not to pick the pony that's ahead by a nose, but the pony that's going to be in the race next year. And so how many times are they going to be around? Now, all of these folks, AWS and Google and so forth, as a platform is, I think all of those are fairly safe. I mean, they're not going anywhere. But the more likely spot is where you have purchased custom software from a firm, and they've decided that they merged with someone else, they lose some of their key talent, and that custom software is a problem. Or you buy a package from someone, and that for example, I deal a lot with law firms. We have 32 vendors that we look at because we think those are the serious ones. There's probably another 60 to look at. But the thing to bet is not on the vendor that provides necessarily every bell and whistle, or it seems to be at this moment ahead by a nose. It's the question of whether or not they're continuing to make the investments required, and whether or not they're going to be here next year. And that's so any of the big players are fine from a foundational point of view, but your personal risk is going to be in the applications on which you rely. And so go with a vendor that's big enough and likely enough to be here next year.
So you can't really go wrong with any of those choices.
I agree, and you can't go wrong, but I would say there's things that differentiate different, we don't say platforms really, but different cloud services, right? And one of them is about customer obsession. So really starting from the customer is the most important principle that we have. And it's not just, slideware, it's something that we really believe in and we execute on at Amazon. So I think what I've seen is really important and different for me since I've been at Amazon is that we truly show this customer obsession and how we build our products, how we work with customers. It just is infused with everything. So, and I like that because it becomes something that we're not differentiating purely on our amazing infrastructure, which is, deeper and wider and all that, but more based on how we serve you, which is how you need to differentiate yourself with your customers. So I think it's aligned that way. There's one other thought I had, but I think that's the main point is that it's about customer obsession and it's about best of breed sometimes versus one size fits all. So and based on that customer obsession, we like to give customers choice. At the same time, we recognize we want to make that choice easy for you and give you the tools to, pick the right things instead of having I always like to say, rather than having like Legos strewn out across the floor like your kids have, you have the Battlestar Galactica kit that tells you, one step at a time. Easy choices.
And simply Augmented, we're partners in all three. So, Azure, GCP, and AWS. And I think that the good news for small businesses is that it's a really great time to be building because you have all these foundational models and these three companies that are competing head to head. And so things are changing really fast, but the innovation's happening really, really quickly, and you're going to benefit from it. So I think you can't go wrong either way. But it was mentioned before that the partners that are in these ecosystems, can help you as you kind of go down that path.
Hi. So, I don't know if they need this. So for your human in the loop comment, right? As you go from unstructured data to a database, you're gonna start making decisions based on that data, right? So how do you mitigate the risk if you make the wrong decisions or make biased decisions on that? Right?
That's a great question. You guys want to answer it first? I've got a couple thoughts, but I'll let you guys go.
I think this is right in the middle of your wheelhouse.
Yeah, I think you should answer.
Yeah, so I would say that, humans in the loop, we are building some staffing and recruiting tools that allow you to read a large volume of resumes and then score that against job descriptions. And when we presented it, when I recently presented it to a large group of county executives, bias was the first thing that they were wondering about. But their question about bias was, can the humans bias the system? They wanted to be able to, in the beginning, set the framework for how the system could be biased itself, and then have humans at the end actually review these resumes. And I just think that you can't divorce people in your business from reviewing this content. And we have, Larry and I have a VP of engineering, very, very senior engineer who uses Copilot to write code. And it's probably a 40% increase in his efficiency, I would say. He's writing code that's suggesting code that's actually pretty good suggestions. And he's flying through his code writing in a way that he hasn't before in the past. But he thinks about it as like a junior intern. And he would never ship that code without looking at it, ever. And so I think it's the same thing with all this marketing, writing, everything that you're dealing with. It's a good time to be an editor, is what I tell people, that are doing this content stuff. Like, editors are not going away. The junior content writers are, but not the editors. And that's true for all sorts of business.
How do you do that at scale, right? When you're reviewing 300 contracts, right? And what do you do? Is there any experience with doing it statistically? Like I pick one out of each, 10 and I review that and I trust it?
Yeah, so the question was, how do you do that at scale? And I think it's, maybe Ray, if you talk about some of the contract reading that these large language models do, my answer to you would be leverage LLMs, leverage AI to help you deal with the scale. When you have a lot of documents to read, instead of taking however many days it was taking these lawyers to read, do it in 5 minutes. I think that you can accelerate by using large language models. We do the same thing when we're trying to correlate data and bring data into a system.
Well, first I'd emphasize something you said. We have a representative from the Ferry Group here, and they use AI to generate some things. I remember working with the guy who runs the Ferry Group. His name's Aaron Blank. He's on the board at the Seattle Chamber, so you can tell him I told this anecdote. He had one of his people write something good. It could have been Jeff here. That was well written and so forth. And I said, well, let me show you what you can do here, Jeff. Tell AI, the ChatGPT, to redo this article in the style of The Economist, the British newspaper. And it did. It rewrote it in the style of The Economist. But you can't get away from the point. Aaron and his team still have to review everything before it goes out. By the way, they never submitted that article for The Economist. That was a different deal. But you never get out of the point of reviewing the stuff. Then with respect to data, I would tend to put it into three categories. The ones that you can't have any mistakes on, you're gonna have to look at all 3,000 records. The ones that I can check statistically, which you already figured out, and the ones where good enough is good enough. And so I think that that's what you do. You build this thing into sections and you look at the data. For example, the comments section may not be as important to you as date of birth. And so you may have to check date of birth in every single record to make sure that you do it right. And anything else that, falls into the category of, where litigation is possible. I think that you won't get out of the point where you have to check it, but that would have been true too, even if you had someone doing data entry for you. So imagine that instead of like taking an OCR and reading this thing through and loading it up, you had a person typing. You'd have the same problem. You'd have to do it, an augmentation of the data to make sure that you weren't putting something, in error into the data.
I think you do need to build it into the process though. And honestly, I don't know technically how it works, but I know we have customers who have automated, millions of pieces of data and millions of documents and things like that. So like the NASDAQ, for example. And that's more on the enterprise side. So I haven't gotten it that deep into it, but I think if it's built into the tools that you're using to build these things, that's what you want to look for. And I can get back to you on specifically how it's done, but I personally don't know that. But maybe you know.
Before we go here, it's such a good question. We recently were working with a known good answer database, and when we brought in a bunch of data into this database, there was over 1,000 questions and answers that a small team had to deal with. And so we leveraged AI to be able to go through and consolidate those questions and answers first. And so I really do think that when you think about huge amounts of data, you should take advantage of the machine to be able to read that data.
Thank you. Viraj Shah, Metso Marketplace. My question is about, we are at a tipping point where every business can now run their own teams for doing all these fancy AI modeling which were not previously available. For my use case, we have medical images, say I am trying to buy, to compare it to a car analogy. I have 10 cars sitting up there, I don't know which model is it, which type is it, right? I take a picture, commercially available off the shelf. Now I'm using it in my use case, in my technology behind the scene. From a legality, like how do we protect? Because images, I don't know if there is any proprietary, but every image we take, there are thousands of images everywhere, there are videos everywhere. If you build it into your code, how do we make sure there is no legal representation required? In my use case, as I said, right, it's a car,
Yeah.
for me it's a medical device. They have thousands of models. I'm using a commercial OEM product, but there are all the off-the-shelf also there, right? I'm using it to make decisions, which editors are still required to finally approve it. But how do we avoid a legal representation at the end because you built it into your code now, and future that would be a problem.
Is it what kind of a copyright?
Copywriting, yeah.
Yeah, can you guys speak to that kind of copyright issues around, proprietary information?
We build the legal guardrails into our processes and products and services that we offer you in terms of building this. So for example, there's watermark that will automatically indicate that an image has been created via artificial intelligence, and we have transparency and that will show you kind of all the information that has gone into this algorithm. So there's many different layers of making sure that if you're building off of something within Bedrock, which is our marketplace for LLMs, you're going to be able to comply with legal requirements. So that's a simple answer. It's not a very deep answer, but basically that's how we protect.
Would you also say, though, that the legal question is still a little up in the air?
I don't know if it's up in the air. I mean, we comply.
It is a little
Yeah.
bit. It is. It might be.
Yeah.
Let I'll give you the answer to that, because I asked that of an attorney, so I'll give you,
Okay,
I'll give you the answer he gave me, and then, I'm not an attorney and I have a weak and lazy mind, so I'm gonna get all of this right. But here's what the attorney said. He said, anything generated by AI is not copyrightable. So if you have an image and it was actually generated by AI, you say, I wanna see 3 people walking down the street in the rain, then that image, even if you put it someplace where they sell photos and stuff like that, does not carry a copyright. So that is settled. Everything else is a matter of argument at this moment. And so the nice folks at AWS have some great, ways to protect you. But the truth is that the legal matter of what is protected and what is not protected and what is fair use and what is not fair use is one of great debate. And taking advantage of the AWS kind of things, and maybe there are other tools out there as well to protect yourself, seems like a wise thing to do. But the other thing I would do is I would talk to some nice attorneys about that as well, to make sure that you stay within the boundaries of what's legal and ethical.
The other thing I'll share with the group is there's a couple of big companies with images in particular, so I really think it's a great question, that will indemnify. And so Adobe Images and stock images, there's a bunch of stock image companies out there. If you use their images, they will take responsibility.
That's right.
And so I would say, for a small business, you should call your attorney, but don't spend too much time with them. Look into some of these tools that are actually going to take responsibility. Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Ellie. I'm with Washington Small Business Development Center. So today's topic is especially relevant. So both Claire and Ray, both of you mentioned starting with the written policy. And I'm glad that my organization is on the right track. So we formed an AI task force of 5 people. We started with developing the policy. Because we have 40 advisors across the state serving thousands of small businesses. So the discussion involved how to use AI internally, externally, and data security, serving small businesses and helping us work more efficiently. After multiple meetings, I have to be frank, we're not going anywhere. We don't have enough knowledge to have written policy that will both be functional and secure and satisfy our sponsors, which involve the federal government and the state government. What are your suggestions?
I just saw this yesterday. It's a tool that we talked about Party Rock and how that's a way to create your own apps, essentially. There's one that is an assessment one, specifically for your use case. I just happened to see that yesterday, so it's really good timing. And it asks you a series of questions. It's just yes, no, and then it produces a plan for you. So start there. I think to the point that many people have made, like you want a human in the loop on that too. And there are, you can talk to us at AWS, and that's one of the things that we can help you with also. But start with that. It's, and I'll get the link to you. Yeah.
And there's another group called Partnership for AI that is a nonprofit that provides free tools for small businesses. We'll put a link to that as well. And they've got frameworks that you can just pull down.
I also think I'm quite glad I don't need this. Question, maybe a little pressure testing on the training. And I love 6-minute video. I have some worry about letting us off the hook that easily because it's so complicated. And if we think it's just about a prompt and not well, how does that prompt work, etc. It's not just linear. Can you talk a little bit more about really what is the baseline for a small business? You don't just let your finance push a button and I get my answer. I have to understand it.
Strong feelings about that.
Okay, I
My strong feelings are, this stuff is about as hard as Excel. Do you remember when you first saw Excel? The thing had little squares on it everywhere this way, and it rose, and it had these squares, and they say, no, it's really good, it's really powerful. And you looked at that and said, yeah, dude, but what does it do? And you tried to figure it out. You looked at an Excel spreadsheet for the first time, and that's about the level of complexity we're talking about here. From your point of view as a small business owner, you're looking at about something as hard to learn as Excel. Now, you think about Excel and you go, okay, but I can use it for something as simple as adding up, the expenses for our next all hands meeting. Or I can use it for something that does predictive modeling on, revenue across a set of product lines and so forth, right? So its capabilities are magnificent. And similar to Excel, AI is like that. You can use it for little things to generate, the email that you have to do and that is the place to get started. If you were trying to learn Excel, you wouldn't start with, learning to do a forecasting model for, a multinational business. It's just too much to digest. So it could be a personal learning style. But my recommendation for most people is to cheese hold the problem. Just learn the thing that you need to know right now and keep adding to your knowledge a little bit at a time. And if you have a whole team of people you're trying to bring up, maybe there's another technique you want to consider that's more immersed and I'm trying to teach them how to do something that's around a new process. Perhaps, but I think for most people, it's like learning Excel. The first thing you do is you learn how to add a row of column, and they say, oh my goodness, this is very good, I can do some other things and some other things. And at some point, you find yourself learning how to do macros and stuff like that. And over time, you become more and more proficient. And people hit a wall where that wall is a function of what they really need to know to run their business, or their propensity to understand complexity and their appetite for going beyond to the next step. So I would treat it like you treated Excel, as something that's important, it's reasonably complex, it's unbelievably capable, but you should set your learning to an approach that takes you to where you can practically apply it in the moment. Does that make any sense?
Claire, we're gonna move into the workshop, but will you have the last word?
Oh, I was gonna comment on that, but I think you said it very well, so I don't need to add anything to that. I would just say, think about what your business problem is first. Work backwards from that, and then think about the technology. So don't start with the technology. That's, in my mind, the most important thing to take out of this.
Thank you, guys. So I think we're gonna move into this workshop session, and it's really a combination of networking so that we can get to know each other, but also the opportunity to talk a little bit about what you've heard and some of the ways that AI might show up in your business. And so the four of us and Larry are going to roam and be at the tables to kind of help facilitate. But I would love it if we could start by introducing ourselves to each other and talking about maybe some of the ways that you've thought about that AI can show up in your business, and we'll see if we can start that kind of exchange. Then we'll come back to you and finish things off.
I can go to any table with.
I just say